I am 73 years old, and I never thought my own children would lock me in my own house, cut the phone line, take my car keys, confiscate my cell phone, say, "Mom, this is for your own good. Sign the papers, and it will all be over." Guardianship papers, papers that would give them my house, my accounts, my life. They had already contacted a realtor, already found me a place in a nursing home, already divided money they hadn't received yet. And I lay on the kitchen floor, having a heart attack, thinking, this is how I die, in my own home, locked in by my own children. My name is Margaret Ann Collins, and I'm telling this story because I can no longer stay silent, because people need to know what their own children are capable of, because somewhere right now, there's another elderly woman just like me, and her family is already making plans, already calling lawyers, already looking at cheaper nursing homes, already calculating how much her house is worth and when they can sell it. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell. This helps other people find our stories. My husband Richard died 2 years ago, 49 years of marriage, 49 years of living together in this house. A white 2-story home on Maple Street, suburbs of Philadelphia, good neighborhood, good neighbors. Richard built this house with his own hands in 1978. Every board, every nail. We raised 3 children here, David, Karen, and Stephen. When Richard died, I thought the worst was behind me. That losing a husband was the limit of pain a person could endure. I was wrong. The worst began 18 months after his death, in April of 2023, when my children decided it was time to take what they believed was rightfully theirs. Let me tell you about my children. David is the oldest, 51 years old, financial consultant. Married to Laura, they have 2 teenage children. David was always ambitious. Even in school, he would recount his change at the store, checking if they'd shortchanged him by a cent. Richard used to say, "The boy has business sense." I thought, the boy has issues with greed, but I stayed silent. Mothers always stay silent about such things, hoping children will grow out of it. David never grew out of it. Karen is the middle child, 48 years old, divorced twice, works as an administrator at a dental clinic, lives in an apartment she's been renting for 15 years because both divorces left her without savings. Karen always felt like the middle one, not as successful as David, not as beloved as Stephen. At least, that's how she saw it. In reality, I loved all 3 equally. But Karen wore her resentment like a medal, and that resentment turned into something dark over time. Stephen is the youngest, 44 years old. My baby, though what kind of baby? He's a head taller than me, broad-shouldered, former college football player. Stephen works as a manager at a construction company, married to Jennifer, 2 small children. Of all 3, Stephen seemed the most normal to me, the kindest, the most like Richard. Turns out I was wrong about that too. The first warning bell rang in February of 2023, 2 months before they locked me in the house. David came by without warning. This was strange. David never came without warning. He's a man of schedules, plans, prearranged visits. He sat in my kitchen drinking coffee I'd made him and looked at me with an expression I didn't understand then. I understand it now. It was the expression of an appraiser. He was evaluating merchandise. "Mom," he said, "how are you really feeling?" "Really?" "Fine," I answered. "A bit lonely after Dad, but I'm managing." "Isn't it hard for you alone in such a big house?" "No, this is my house. Our house. Dad's and mine. I'm comfortable here." "But you need to maintain the lawn, the heating, everything." That's a big burden for a woman your age. I'm 73, David, not 93. I'm managing. He nodded, but didn't back down. Karen, Stephen, and I have been thinking, maybe it makes sense to consider options. Senior communities. Everything is organized there. There's medical staff, various activities. You wouldn't need to worry about the house. A nursing home? I asked directly. Not a nursing home. An active senior community. Completely different thing. David, I set down my cup. I'm not moving anywhere. This is my house. I will die here, as planned. Mom, let's not be dramatic. I'm not being dramatic. I'm stating a fact. I will stay here until the end. Case closed. He left, unhappy. But I thought he backed off. A week later, Karen came by with the same speech about the burden of a big house, about active senior communities, about how they're all worried. I gave her the same answer. Another week later, Stephen, with Jennifer and the kids. The children played in the yard while Stephen sat in the same chair where David had sat 2 weeks earlier. Mom, he said, we're all worried. You're alone. Dad's gone. If something happens... I have Hector, I said. Stephen looked at the dog lying at my feet. Hector raised his head at the sound of his name. An old golden retriever, 13 years old, gray muzzle, arthritis in his back legs, but his eyes, clear, intelligent, loving. Richard brought Hector home 12 years ago, a little ginger ball that fit in his palm. This is your dog, Richard, I said then. I'm not going to clean up after him. Richard laughed. Of course, dear, of course. By the end of the first week, Hector was sleeping in our bedroom. By the end of the first month, next to our bed, Richard trained him every day, taught him commands, took him fishing. Hector was his shadow. And then Richard got sick, pancreatic cancer, 6 months from diagnosis to death. In the final weeks, Hector wouldn't leave his bedside, lay beside him, head resting on the edge of the mattress, looking at Richard with his brown eyes, as if he understood, as if saying goodbye. When Richard died, Hector didn't eat for 3 days, sat by the bedroom door and whined, and I sat next to him and cried. We survived it together, the dog and I, 2 old creatures who had lost the one they loved. Hector is a dog, Mom, Stephen said then, in February. He can't call an ambulance if you feel sick. Hector is family, and I replied, and I'm not moving anywhere. Stephen left, with the same displeased expression as David, with the same resentment in his eyes as Karen. I thought they'd backed off. I didn't know they were just changing tactics. In March, they organized a family dinner, all 3 children, their spouses, the grandchildren, at a restaurant. Just to get together, Mom. Haven't seen everyone in a while. I went, wore a nice dress, put on makeup. At my age, that takes effort, but I've always believed, if you're still alive, look alive. The dinner was strange. Everyone was too nice, too attentive. Laura, David's wife, who usually barely acknowledged my existence, was suddenly interested in my health. Jennifer, Stephen's wife, was asking about my plans. Karen was smiling so wide that my cheeks hurt just looking at her. Something was wrong. After the main course, before dessert, David pulled out a folder. Mom, he said, we wanted to talk to you about the future, about planning. What kind of planning? Financial, legal. You see, we all understand that you're healthy and full of energy. But at your age, it's wise to have a plan. In case, just in case. He opened the folder. Inside were documents, many documents. These are power of attorney papers, David explained, so that one of us can act on your behalf, if needed, manage accounts, make decisions about property, about medical care. I looked at the documents, then at David, then at Karen and Stephen, who sat with identical expressions of tense anticipation. You want me to sign over control of my money and house to you? Just like that? Over dessert? It's not control, Mom. It's insurance, in case something happens to you. If something happens to me, I have a will. It's with the notary. You'll all get equal shares after my death, as planned. But we're not talking about death, Karen interjected. We're talking about a situation where you're still alive but can't make decisions yourself. Dementia, for example, or a stroke. Someone needs to be able to act on your behalf. And that someone is David? All of us together, Stephen said. David, because he has financial experience, but we'll make decisions together. I looked at my children, at these people I had given birth to, raised, fed, whose diapers I'd changed, whose tears I'd wiped, whom I loved more than life. They sat before me demanding control of my life, over dessert, at a restaurant, 3 against 1. No, I said. Mom, no, I will not sign these papers, not now, not over dessert at a restaurant, not because you're worried when I'm unable to make decisions. If that ever happens, we'll talk, with my lawyer, on my terms. But right now, no. I stood up. Thank you for dinner, but I need to go home. Hector needs to be walked. And I left, called a taxi, went home. Hector met me at the door, wagging tail, happy eyes, the only creature in my life who was genuinely glad to see me. You know what, Hector, I said to him, kneeling and hugging him around the neck. They want to take the house. They think I don't understand, but I understand. I understand very well. Hector licked my cheek. We sat like that for a long time. An old woman and an old dog, in the house my husband built, in the house my children wanted to take from me. April began quietly, too quietly. The children didn't call, didn't visit. After the February pressure campaign and the March dinner, silence. This should have alarmed me, but I was glad for the pause, glad for the chance to live my life without pressure, without hints, without folders full of documents. I worked in the garden. There's a lot to do in April. Prepare flower beds, plant early flowers. Richard always tended the garden. Now I did it, slower, with more effort. But I did it. Hector lay on the porch and watched me dig in the soil. Sometimes he'd come over, sniff around, return to his spot. He'd aged too. Arthritis made it hard for him to run like before. But he still loved being nearby, still guarded me, as he once guarded Richard. On April 12th, Karen called me. Mom, we need to talk. As a family, it's important. About what? Come to David's on Saturday, at 2 o'clock. We'll explain everything. Karen, if this is about the power of attorney again, it's not about the power of attorney. It's about family. Please, Mom, just come. I agreed. I don't know why. Maybe I hoped I was wrong, that my children weren't the people I'd thought they were these past months, that there was an explanation for their behavior. Saturday, April 14th, I will remember for the rest of my life. I arrived at David's at 2 o'clock. The taxi dropped me off at his big house in the wealthy neighborhood. 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a pool in the backyard. A house he bought on credit he could barely afford, but which displayed success. Everyone was already there. David, Laura, Karen, Stephen, Jennifer. Even the grandchildren, though they were quickly sent off to play outside. Mom, sit down. David pointed to an armchair. Would you like something to drink? Water. He brought water. Everyone sat down. Me, alone in the armchair. Them, on the couch opposite. Like judges in a courtroom. Mom, David began, We've been thinking a lot these past weeks, and we've concluded that the current situation can no longer continue. What situation? You, alone, in a big house, without help, without supervision. I'm managing. No, Mom, Karen interjected. You're not managing. You think you're managing, but we see signs of decline. What signs? You forget things, Stephen said. Last time I visited, you didn't remember that I'd called the day before. This was a lie. A complete, absolute lie. Stephen hadn't called me the day before that visit. I remembered clearly. You confused dates, Karen added, and names. At dinner, you called Jennifer Linda. Another lie. Linda was Stephen's first wife, whom he divorced 10 years ago. I never confused them. Never. We consulted with a specialist, David said. Showed him our observations, described the symptoms. He believes you may have early-stage dementia. The world around me narrowed. Sounds became muffled. I looked at my children, at these 3 people I loved, and didn't recognize them. You showed some doctor observations about me, without my knowledge, without my consent? We were worried, Mom. You're lying. I stood up. Everything you just said is a lie. I don't forget anything. I don't confuse names. Stephen didn't call me the day before that visit. I remember exactly, and I have never in my life called Jennifer Linda. See? Karen turned to her brothers. She doesn't remember. That's a classic symptom, denial. Karen, look me in the eye, I said. Look me in the eye and tell me I confuse names. Tell me the truth. Karen looked away. We're doing this for your own good, Mom, David said. No. You're doing this for the house, for the money. You want to declare me incompetent, get control of my assets, sell the house, and split the money while I'm still alive. Silence. Long, heavy silence. That's offensive, David finally said. We're your children. We love you. We want to help. Then help me get to a taxi. I'm leaving. I walked toward the door. Stephen blocked my path. Mom, he said, we can't let you go. Not in this state. It's not safe. Stephen, step away from the door. Mom, step away from the door. He didn't move. David came up behind me, gently but firmly took my elbow. Mom, let's talk. Calmly. Sit down. Have some water. Let go of me, David. We can't let you go in this state. You're upset. You're not yourself. Let's talk. Let me go. I yanked my arm free, tried to get around Stephen. He blocked my path again. Mom, please, don't make this harder. Just listen to us. I looked at my youngest son, at his face, at his eyes, and didn't recognize him. This was a stranger, a man holding his mother against her will, participating in a conspiracy, lying to my face and pretending it was care. Stephen, I said quietly, Dad would never have forgiven you for this. He blinked, flinched. For a second, just a second, something flickered in his eyes. Shame, regret. I saw the boy he used to be, the teenager who'd come to me with his problems, who'd asked me for advice about girls, who'd cried on my shoulder when his college football dreams ended with a knee injury. The son I'd raised, the man I'd loved, and I saw what he'd become, what greed had made him. Stephen, please, I tried one more time. You're not like David. You're not like Karen. You have a conscience. I know you do. Look at what you're doing. Look at what you're helping them do. For a moment, just a moment, I thought he might step aside, thought I might have reached him. Then David's voice from behind me, Stephen, stay where you are. And the moment passed. Stephen's face hardened. The shame disappeared, replaced by that same cold calculation I'd seen in all of them. But he didn't step aside. We're doing what we have to, he said. They drove me home. David at the wheel, Stephen next to me in the back seat. Karen followed in her car. They said they'd drive me because I shouldn't be worried, and they'd come back tomorrow to continue the conversation. Said everything would be fine. When we pulled up to my house, Hector barked from inside. He always barked when he heard a car at the gate. "Damn dog," David muttered. "Should have been put down long ago." "Don't you dare talk about my dog that way." "Mom, he's 13. He can barely walk. It's inhumane." "Inhumane is what you're doing to me." We went inside. Hector rushed to me, wagging his tail. I bent down, hugged him. He licked my face. "Good boy, good boy." David and Stephen followed. Karen stayed outside, talking on the phone. "Mom," David said, "we need your phone." "What?" "Your cell phone. Give it to us." "Why?" "We don't want you calling anyone in your upset state, saying something foolish, calling the police or a lawyer when you're not yourself. This is for your own good." "You have no right." "Mom." David stepped toward me. "The phone." He held out his hand. I looked at him, at my oldest son, at this man I had breastfed, whose diapers I'd changed, whom I'd taught to walk. He looked at me with eyes that held nothing but cold calculation. I gave him the phone. Car keys, too. "David, keys." I gave him the keys. "And where's the landline? I don't see the phone." "In the living room." Stephen went to the living room, returned with the phone, yanked the cord from the wall. "We don't want you calling anywhere in your upset state," David repeated. "This is a temporary measure. Tomorrow we'll come back, talk calmly, discuss everything. You're locking me in my own house. We're protecting you from yourself, from foolish decisions, from calls you'll regret." Karen came inside. "Done," she told David. "The doctor will come on Monday, examine her, issue the assessment." "What doctor?" I asked. "Not your concern, Mom. Rest, watch TV. We'll be back tomorrow." They left. I heard the door slam, the engines start, the cars drive away. I went to the door. It was locked from the outside. David had used the spare key set, the one I'd given him just in case years ago. I was locked in my own house, by my own children, without a phone, without car keys, without any way to contact the outside world. Hector came to me, nuzzled his nose into my hand. I sank to the floor beside him and cried. The night passed in a fog. I tried to open the windows and blocked, tried to find an old phone, unsuccessful. Thought about going out the back door, also locked. They had prepared. Thought of everything, except one thing. The dog door. A small plastic flap in the back door that Richard had installed years ago so Hector could go out to the yard. The children must have forgotten about it, or decided it was too small. It was too small for a person, but not for a dog. I didn't sleep all night. Sat in the kitchen, petted Hector, thought. What to do? The neighbors, the nearest neighbors, the Martins, lived 2 houses down. Good people. Have known me for years. If I could contact them, but how? By morning, Sunday, April 15th, I still hadn't figured out a plan, and then I felt sick. It started with shortness of breath, a tightness in my chest that I first attributed to anxiety. Then the tightness became pressure, and the pressure became pain. I knew these symptoms, had read about them in health magazines, had watched public service announcements on television, had lost 2 friends to heart attacks over the years, and listened to survivors describe how it felt. Heart attack. This is what it feels like, I thought. This is how I die. I tried to stand from the kitchen chair. The room spun. My legs gave out. I fell to the floor, my hips striking the cold tile with a crack of pain that was nothing compared to the crushing weight on my chest. The pain intensified, spread to my left arm, to my jaw. My vision narrowed, darkness creeping in from the edges. I lay on the cold tile floor of my kitchen, the same floor where I'd taught my children to walk, where I'd comforted them after skinned knees and broken hearts, where I'd danced with Richard on our 40th anniversary, and thought, this is how I die. In my own home, locked in by my own children, without a phone, without help, without anyone who cared. I thought about Richard, wondered if I'd see him again, hoped that wherever he was, he didn't know what our children had done. I thought about my life, 73 years. Had it been enough? Had I done enough? Had I loved enough? I thought about regrets, things unsaid, trips not taken, moments not savored, and I thought about my children, about how they'd find me tomorrow, about how they'd pretend to grieve, about how quickly they'd move from funeral to probate court. The darkness crept closer. My heartbeat became irregular, a stumbling rhythm that felt like it might stop at any moment. Then Hector was there. Hector came to me, lay down beside me, rested his head on my stomach. Hector, I whispered, you need to. I couldn't finish. The pain was too intense. Hector lifted his head, looked at me with his brown eyes, and did something he'd never done before. He stood up, walked to the back door, looked at the dog door, then at me. Hector. He pushed through the flap, disappeared. I lay on the floor, alone, listening to my heart beating irregularly, with interruptions, and waited. Later, when I was already in the hospital, when doctors had stabilized my condition, the neighbors told me what happened. Hector ran to their house, a 13-year-old dog with arthritis, who can barely walk, according to David, ran across 2 yards, not walked, ran. The vet told me later that the adrenaline must have overridden his pain, that dogs, when they sense their humans are in danger, can push past physical limitations that normally stop them. That love, in a very real biological sense, can make them stronger. My old arthritic dog ran for me. Because he loved me. He barked at the Martins' door, loudly, continuously, desperately. Not his normal bark, Mrs. Martin told me later, not the half-hearted woof he'd give at a squirrel or a passing car. This was a bark of alarm, a bark of terror, a bark that said, something is terribly wrong. When Mrs. Martin opened up, he grabbed her sleeve and pulled her toward the exit. He was frantic, she told me, sitting by my hospital bed the next day, tears running down her face. Frantic in a way I've never seen any dog. He kept pulling me, running a few steps toward your house, running back to me, barking. I just knew something terrible had happened. She called to her husband. They both followed Hector. The dog led them across the yards, never stopping his urgent barking, never letting them slow down. When they reached my house, he stood at the front door and howled. Actually howled, like a wolf, like a creature possessed. That's when Tom noticed the door, Mrs. Martin said. All of them, locked from outside. Who does that? Who locks someone in their own house? Mr. Martin tried the back door first, then the garage, then the windows, all secured. I was about to call the police, he said, taking over the story. But then I thought, what if she's in there hurt? What if she needs help right now? I couldn't wait for police to arrive, to figure out how to get in, to deal with bureaucracy. So I grabbed the biggest rock I could find from your garden bed and put it through the living room window. The glass shattered. The alarm didn't go off. My children had disabled it. Mr. Martin climbed through, careful of the jagged edges, and ran to find me. Hector had already squeezed back through the dog door and was lying beside me on the kitchen floor, licking my hand, whimpering. He wouldn't leave you. Mr. Martin said. Even when the ambulance came, even when the paramedics tried to work on you, he wouldn't leave. They had to pick him up and carry him outside, and even then he stood at the door, watching through the broken window, making sure they were helping you. I learned later that Hector had cuts on his paws from running on the gravel, that he'd worn a patch of fur raw pushing through the dog door, that he'd strained muscles in his back legs that made his arthritis worse for weeks afterward. He'd hurt himself saving me, and he'd do it again in a heartbeat. The ambulance arrived in 8 minutes. Doctors said 20 more minutes, and it would have been too late. Hector saved my life. The old dog my children wanted to put down because he was useless now. I spent 4 days in the hospital. Stent, observation, medication. The children came on the first day, all 3, with flowers, with smiles, with concern. "Mom, how are you feeling? We were so scared." I looked at them, at these faces I'd known all my life, and said nothing. "Mom, leave." "What?" "Leave my room. All 3 of you. Now." "Mom, we came to support you. You came to check if I'd died, to find out if the house was free. Leave, and don't come back." The nurse looked into the room. "Everything all right, Mrs. Collins?" "My visitors are leaving. Please add them to the list of persons not allowed to visit." "Mom, you locked me in the house, took my phone, took my keys, left me to die. If not for Hector, I'd be dead, and you would have come tomorrow for your conversation and found a corpse. What would you have done then? Called the police? Or the realtor first?" Karen started crying. David went pale. Stephen stared at the floor. "Leave," I repeated, "and prepare yourselves, because I'm calling my lawyer and the police and telling them everything." They left. The nurse stayed with me, helped me calm down, brought water. "Mrs. Collins," she said gently, "would you like me to call someone? Do you have friends? Other family?" I had one friend, Harold Whitmore, retired lawyer, Richard's friend for many years, an 80-year-old man with a sharp mind and memory for precedents. "Yes," I said, "there's one person. Write down the number?" Harold came the same day. He looked old. 82 years is no joke, but his eyes were clear, attentive, lawyerly. "Margaret," he said, sitting down next to my bed, "tell me everything. From the beginning. Don't leave out details," I told him. "About February, about the family dinner in March, about the intervention in April, about the locked doors, the confiscated phone, the doctor who was supposed to come, issue an assessment." Harold listened silently, made notes in a notepad. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. "Margaret," he finally said, "do you understand what they were trying to do? Declare me incompetent, get guardianship, take the house. It's called forced guardianship, an old scheme. Adult children declare an elderly parent incompetent, usually with the help of a corrupt doctor who writes up the needed assessment. The court appoints a guardian, typically one of the children. The guardian gets control of assets, sells the property, manages the accounts. The parent ends up in a cheap nursing home. Or worse. Sometimes the parent just dies, conveniently and timely, when the assets have already been transferred. I looked at Harold, my friend, Richard's friend, a man who had seen many legal nightmares in his career. "You think my children are capable of—" "I think they already scheduled a doctor's visit for Monday. Today is Sunday. If you hadn't ended up in the hospital, tomorrow you would have received an official diagnosis from their pocket specialist. Within a week, there would have been a guardianship hearing. Within a month, you'd be living in a 3x4 room in a facility on the edge of the state, and your house would be up for sale." "They're my children, Harold. I know. That's exactly why it's so easy. Courts tend to believe family. They're her children. They want what's best. Nobody wants to think that one's own children could exploit their parents. But they can. And they do it more often than you'd think. What should I do? Harold took out another notepad. First, police report, false imprisonment, theft of personal property, phone, keys. These are criminal offenses. Second, independent medical evaluation, full cognitive assessment from a doctor you choose, a document confirming you're fully competent. Third, we need to find out who this doctor was supposed to be on Monday, who he is, who hired him. Does he have a history of such assessments? Fourth, your house. Check if they've already filed any documents, signed anything in your name, contacted realtors. Fifth, and this is important, cameras. We need to install cameras in your house, hidden ones, in case they try something while you're in the hospital or when you return home. You're saying all this so businesslike. Harold looked at me, and for a second his lawyerly face wavered. Margaret, he said quietly, Richard was my friend. You're my friend. And what your children did, it's monstrous. They locked you up, left you without communication. If not for the dog, you'd be dead. And they would have come in the morning, found the body, played grief, and in 6 months would be dividing the inheritance. I can't forgive that. And I'll do everything to make sure they answer for it. I took his hand. Thank you, Harold. Don't thank me. Thank Hector. He's the real hero of this story. The next few days were spent preparing. Harold worked fast. For an 82-year-old retired lawyer, he moved with the energy of a 30-year-old prosecutor. The police accepted my report. The detective, a young woman named Emily Chen, listened to my story with professional calm, but I saw her eyes darken with each new fact. Mrs. Collins, she said, will open an investigation. False imprisonment is a serious charge, especially given your health condition and what happened. But I need to warn you, elder abuse cases within families are complicated. Juries don't like to convict children who are taking care of mom. They weren't taking care. They were preparing a robbery. I know, but we need to prove it. Documents about the doctor who was supposed to come, correspondence between your children, witness testimony, anything that shows intent, not just excessive concern. Mr. Martin, the neighbor who broke the window and found me on the floor, gave a statement. His wife confirmed the story about Hector. The dog literally led me to your house, he said in the recording. Pulled my sleeve, barked, ran ahead, came back. I understood. Something had happened. And when I saw that all the doors were locked from the outside, that was strange. Who locks a house from the outside when someone's inside? The independent medical evaluation confirmed, I am fully competent, no dementia, no cognitive decline. Test results, above average for my age. Mrs. Collins, said the neurologist, if you showed me these results without a name, I'd assume a 60 to 65-year-old woman was being tested. Your brain is working excellently. This document became the first weapon in my arsenal, but the main discovery was yet to come. Harold found the doctor, Dr. Philip Benson, psychiatrist, private practice in the suburbs. He has an interesting history, Harold said, spreading a folder of documents before me. Over the past 5 years, he's issued incompetency findings in 14 cases. 14 elderly people, all after consultations with relatives, who then obtained guardianship and control over assets. Is that legal? Technically, yes. A doctor has the right to give assessments about a patient's cognitive state. But practically, it's a business. Relatives pay. The doctor issues the needed paperwork. The elderly person loses rights, property, freedom, all by the book. And no one investigated? They investigated, twice, both times, closed for lack of evidence. Benson is smart. Documents are always in order. Patient demonstrated signs of cognitive decline. Relatives expressed justified concerns. Legally clean. And now, there's you. You're alive, you're competent, officially confirmed, and you're ready to testify. This changes things. Before, all of Benson's patients were already in nursing homes, isolated, some with real dementia that developed after being placed in facilities. You're the first who can tell the truth. What needs to be done? We need to talk to the prosecutor's office. If we can prove conspiracy between Benson and your children, this is a criminal case. Fraud, conspiracy to deprive you of property, false imprisonment. My children could go to prison? Yes. I was silent, looked at the folder of documents, at the name Philip Benson, at the photo, a gray-haired man in his 60s, friendly face, kind eyes, kind eyes. How many old people had those kind eyes sent to nursing homes? How many lives destroyed? How many houses sold? How many accounts emptied? Do what needs to be done, Harold, I said. I'm ready. I was discharged from the hospital after 4 days. Mr. Martin drove me home. Hector met me at the door. He was sitting on the porch. The neighbors had looked after him while I was in the hospital, and waiting. When the car stopped, he stood up. His tail started wagging side to side. I got out of the car. Slowly, the doctors had warned against sudden movements. I knelt down beside the dog. Hello, my good boy. Hello, my hero. Hector licked my face, rested his head on my shoulder, and I hugged him, the old dog who had saved my life. Thank you, I whispered. Thank you, Hector. We went inside. The window Mr. Martin had broken was already replaced. Harold had taken care of it. Everything else, as I'd left it. A cup on the kitchen table, a book on the couch, the throw blanket I'd knitted last winter, my house, my life, that my children had wanted to take from me. I walked through the rooms, checked everything. Hector followed me like a shadow. Then I sat in Richard's chair, the same chair where he used to sit in the evenings, reading, looking out the window, thinking. Richard, I said aloud, you wouldn't believe it. You just wouldn't believe what our children are capable of. Hector came over, rested his head on my knees. But I'll manage. You know me, I'll manage. The next day, Harold brought a technician, a young guy with a bag of equipment. Cameras, Harold explained. 4 of them. Living room, kitchen, entryway, backyard. Everything records to the cloud. Even if they find a camera and destroy it, the recording remains. They won't know the cameras are there. No. The devices are small, hidden in ordinary objects, clocks, picture frames, professional equipment. The technician worked for 3 hours, then showed me how to view recordings on a tablet. If anyone enters, you'll see it immediately, and the recording will be evidence. When he left, Harold stayed. Margaret, he said, Detective Chen found something interesting. Your children contacted Benson 2 weeks ago, before they came to you in April. They were preparing. The consultation cost them $3,000. The visit and examination, another $5,000. The incompetency finding, $20,000. $20,000? For a piece of paper that would have taken your house and accounts from you. For them, an investment. The house is worth $800,000. In your accounts, about $300. Plus life insurance, $150. Total, over $1 million. For $28,000 in initial expenses. $1 million. That's what my children saw when they looked at me. Not a mother, not a person. $1 million that hadn't died yet. How were they going to pay Benson? Already paid. David transferred $8,000 2 weeks ago. The rest after receiving the assessment. So we have evidence of payment? Yes, and correspondence. Detective Chen got a warrant for David's phones. There's a lot of interesting things. Tell me. Harold pulled out printouts. These are messages between David and Benson, and between David, Karen, and Stephen. He began reading. David to Benson. My mother is showing signs of cognitive decline. Forgets names, confuses dates, becoming paranoid. Thinks we want to rob her. Need a professional evaluation. Benson to David. Understood. Standard consultation, $3,000. Visit and examination, $5,000. Assessment, depends on the result. David to Benson. You understand what result we need. Benson to David. Understood. $20,000 for the needed assessment, half up front. David to Karen, Stephen. Made a deal with the doctor. 28 total. Split 3 ways, about $9,000 each. Mom won't know until it's too late. Karen to David, Stephen. When's the visit? David to Karen, Stephen. Monday. We'll take her home Saturday. Take her phone so she can't call anyone. Monday, Benson. Tuesday, court. By the end of the month, guardianship. Stephen to David, Karen. What if she refuses to sign? David to Stephen, Karen. She won't refuse. Without a phone and car, she can't contact a lawyer, and Benson will issue the incompetency finding. Then her consent isn't needed. The court will decide for her. Karen to David. Stephen. Perfect. The realtor already looked at the house. Says 800 plus if we fix it up a bit. David to Karen, Stephen. After the sale, split 3 ways, plus accounts, plus insurance. Over $1 million for the 3 of us. Stephen to David, Karen. What about the dog? David to Stephen, Karen. Put it down. He's old and just getting in the way. Harold fell silent. I sat motionless, stared at the printouts, at the words my children had written. Mom won't know until it's too late. Her consent isn't needed. Put it down. He's old and just getting in the way. Margaret? I looked up. I'm fine, I said. Now I'm perfectly fine. In what sense? In the sense that I no longer have any doubts. None at all. They planned this, cold-bloodedly, cynically. They were discussing the price of my house while I was still alive. They were going to kill my dog. They wanted to lock me away in a nursing home and forget about me. What do you want to do? I want them to answer for everything. I want a trial, public, with cameras, with journalists. I want the whole world to know what children are capable of when they're thinking about inheritance. And I want Benson, this kind doctor, to go to prison. For all those old people he helped rob. This will be a long process. I'm 73 years old, Harold. I still have time. A week later, Detective Chen called. Mrs. Collins, we have enough evidence for an arrest. The prosecutor's office has agreed to file charges. What charges? False imprisonment, all 3. Conspiracy to commit fraud, all 3. Reckless endangerment, given your health condition and that they deprived you of the ability to call for help. For Benson, conspiracy plus abuse of medical authority. When's the arrest? Tomorrow morning. All 4 simultaneously. We don't want to give them a chance to warn each other. Tomorrow. Tomorrow my children would be arrested. Good, I said. Thank you, Detective. Mrs. Collins, are you sure? These are your children. Arrest, trial, possibly prison. This is serious. I'm sure. They made their choice. Now I'm making mine. They were arrested early in the morning, 6 o'clock. Simultaneously, David at his big house, Karen at her rental apartment, Stephen at his family home, Benson at his private clinic. I knew this because Detective Chen called me right after. Done. All 4 are at the station. They'll await arraignment. I sat in the kitchen, drank coffee. Hector lay at my feet. My children were behind bars. I waited to feel something, grief, regret, doubt. But I felt only emptiness and strange relief, the end of waiting, the beginning of justice. The news picked up the story immediately. 3 children arrested for conspiracy against elderly mother. Dog saves owner's life after children lock her in. Psychiatrist arrested for participation in forced guardianship scheme. Journalists came to my house, called, wrote letters. I declined everyone, for now. Wait until the trial, Harold advised. After the verdict, then you tell your story. Then it will be a story with an ending, a just ending. I waited. The trial was scheduled for September. 5 months of waiting. 5 months during which my children tried to contact me, through lawyers, through letters, through distant relatives who still spoke to me. Mom, please, let's talk. We can explain. It was a misunderstanding. We meant well. I didn't respond. Not to a single letter, not to a single call. Their lawyers tried to negotiate a deal, guilty plea in exchange for probation. I refused. If they want to avoid trial, let them admit everything publicly, completely, that they conspired, that they hired a corrupt doctor, that they planned to take my house, that they planned to put Hector down, everything, no probation, with real punishment. Their lawyers refused. Then trial, I said. September the 19th. The trial began. The courtroom was packed. Journalists, cameras, curious onlookers. The story had become famous. An old lady, a dog, evil children, a corrupt doctor. Everything newspapers love. I sat in the front row. In the blue suit Richard loved, with a straight back, with clear eyes. Across from me, my children, David, Karen, Stephen, in identical gray suits, with identical expressions of fear, and Benson, separate, with his lawyer. His kind eyes now stared at the floor. The judge, an elderly woman named Elizabeth Harper, opened the session. The people of the state of Pennsylvania versus David Collins, Karen Collins, Stephen Collins, and Philip Benson. Charges: false imprisonment, conspiracy to commit fraud, reckless endangerment. How do the defendants plead? One by one, each of them stood. Not guilty, not guilty, not guilty, not guilty. They denied everything, even with the text messages, even with the recordings, even with witness testimony. Their lawyers claimed this was excessive but sincere concern. They worried about their mother. They didn't plan anything bad. The phone was taken because she was upset and might say something she'd regret. The doors were locked, accidentally. Accidentally. All doors, from the outside. The trial lasted 3 weeks. First week, prosecution witnesses. Mr. Martin told how Hector led him to my house, how he found all doors locked, how he broke the window and found me on the floor. She was lying unconscious. The dog was next to her. The dog wouldn't leave, whimpering, licking her hand, as if trying to wake her. The EMT confirmed 20 more minutes, and I would have died. The cardiologist from the hospital explained the heart attack was caused by stress, severe emotional stress. What kind of stress could cause such a reaction in a 73-year-old woman? The prosecutor asked. Intense conflict, a sense of threat, fear. If the patient was in a situation she perceived as life-threatening, this could certainly provoke an attack. For example, if her own children locked her in a house and took away her means of communication, yes, that could cause such a reaction. The independent cognitive expert presented my test results. Above average, no signs of dementia. Mrs. Collins is fully competent. Her cognitive functions correspond to a 60 to 65-year-old. There is no basis for an incompetency finding. Detective Chen presented the correspondence, every message, every plan, every detail of the conspiracy. Mom won't know until it's too late. Her consent isn't needed. Over $1 million for the 3 of us. She showed the bank transfers, $8,000 to Benson, $3,000 consultation, $5,000 examination. The jurors looked at the screen with the printouts, then at my children. I saw their faces, saw them reading the words, saw them understand. These weren't children who cared about Mom. These were fraudsters who planned a robbery. Second week, defense. David's lawyer called him to the witness stand. Mr. Collins, tell us why you were worried about your mother's condition. David took a deep breath, looked at the jury. My mom. After Dad died, she changed, became withdrawn, sometimes forgot things. We, my sister, my brother, and I, we all noticed. And we were scared something would happen to her, that she'd fall and couldn't call for help, or leave the house and get lost. We wanted to protect her. And the consultation with Dr. Benson, we wanted a professional opinion to find out if there really were problems, not to take her property, just to know. And the correspondence, the words about $1 million for the 3 of us. David lowered his eyes. That was poor wording. We were discussing what would happen to the property if Mom needed constant care. Nursing homes are expensive. We were thinking about selling the house to cover expenses, not to split between ourselves. And the words about the dog? Put it down. He's old and just getting in the way. That was cruel of me. I regret it. But Hector really is old. We thought it would be easier for Mom in a facility without an animal. Easier. Less hassle, less responsibility. The prosecutor stood for cross-examination. Mr. Collins, you just said you were worried about your mother, wanted to protect her. Why then did you lock her in the house and take her phone? We didn't lock her. We just wanted her to rest. Think. We were planning to come back the next day and talk. All doors were locked from the outside. Was that accidental? We perhaps were overly cautious about security. Cell phone confiscated, landline disconnected, car keys taken. That's security too? We didn't want her driving somewhere in an upset state. Mr. Collins, your mother had a heart attack. She lay on the kitchen floor, without a phone, without any way to call for help. If not for the dog, she would have died. Do you understand that? That. We couldn't have foreseen that. You couldn't have foreseen that a 73-year-old woman with a history of heart problems might have a heart attack from stress. You're a financial consultant. You work with risks. And you couldn't calculate this risk? David was silent. Or, the prosecutor continued, did you calculate it and decide that if Mom died, that was also an acceptable outcome? The inheritance would still go to you? That's a monstrous accusation. It's a logical conclusion from your actions. You locked an elderly woman without communication in a house where she was alone. You knew she had a weak heart. You left no way to reach the outside world. Either you're idiots or you didn't mind her death. Objection, David's lawyer shouted. Sustained, the judge tapped her gavel. But the jury had already heard. Karen testified the next day. She cried a lot. I loved Mom, love Mom. I never wanted to hurt her. This was David's idea. He said it would be better for everyone, that Mom doesn't understand she needs help, that we had to intervene. And you agreed? David is my older brother. He's always made the decisions in the family. After Dad, he kind of took his place. I was used to listening to him. You participated in correspondence about selling the house, about $1 million for the 3 of us. Was that David's idea too? Karen paused. No, that was a joint decision. So you knew about the plan? Yes. And agreed? Yes. And didn't stop it? Karen hung her head. No. The prosecutor was merciless. Miss Collins, your mother lay on the floor with a heart attack, without a phone that you helped take, behind locked doors that you helped lock. If she had died, that would be on your conscience. Do you understand that? Karen sobbed. We didn't want. What didn't you want? For her to die? Or to get caught? Objection. Sustained. But the jury heard again. Stephen was last of the children. He didn't cry, sat straight, looked at the judge. Mr. Collins, what can you say in your defense? I made a mistake. Listened to my brother when I should have listened to my conscience. Participated in a plan that was wrong. I'm guilty. I won't make excuses. Are you admitting guilt? Factually, yes. Legally, my lawyer advises sticking to not guilty. But morally, yes. I'm guilty. This was unexpected. The prosecutor asked, Mr. Collins, why did you participate in this plan? Stephen paused. Money. I needed money. I have 2 small children, a mortgage, debts. David said, Mom will die soon anyway, why wait? We can get the inheritance now. And I agreed, because I was weak, greedy, stupid. You understand your mother could have died? Yes. And I'll live with that for the rest of my life. I'll know that I almost killed my own mother for money. He looked at me, for the first time during the entire trial, straight in the eyes. Mom, he said, forgive me. I know you won't forgive, but I'm asking. I didn't respond. Looked at him, at my youngest son, at the one I'd thought was most like Richard, and saw nothing like Richard. Benson defended himself professionally. I'm a doctor. I was asked to evaluate a patient. I didn't get to do that because events developed unexpectedly. All payments were for professional services, nothing illegal. The prosecutor presented his history. 14 cases over 5 years. 14 elderly people declared incompetent after his assessments. 14 families who obtained guardianship and control of assets. Dr. Benson, interesting statistics, 14 out of 14. Every patient you examined at relatives' request was found incompetent, not a single exception. That's either an incredible coincidence or I examined patients with obvious problems. Families didn't come to me for nothing. And the Collins family? Mrs. Collins passed an independent evaluation. Results: above average for her age. No cognitive problems. But you took money for an incompetency finding. A finding about a woman you never even examined. I had planned the examination. You had planned to sign a document you were paid for, $20,000 for the needed result. Those are your words in correspondence with David Collins. Benson went pale. That was imprecise wording. Imprecise, like all 14 of your assessments. How many old people did you send to nursing homes for their children's money, doctor? Objection. Sustained. But the jury had already heard everything. 3rd week, closing arguments. The prosecutor spoke for an hour. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, before you, not a story about children who cared too much about their mother. This is a story about conspiracy, about greed, about cold-blooded calculation. 3 adult children, a financial consultant, an administrator, a manager. Not poor, not desperate people. People who looked at their 73-year-old mother and saw not a person, but $1 million. They hired a doctor, a corrupt doctor who signs any assessment for $20,000. A doctor with a history, 14 elderly people in 5 years, 14 lives broken for profit. They planned an intervention, drove their mother home, took her phone, car keys, the landline, locked all doors, and left a 73-year-old woman with a bad heart alone, without communication, without any way to call for help. What did they think? That she'd calmly wait until Monday? That she'd sign whatever they told her to? Or that if she died, that was also an acceptable outcome? Margaret Collins survived, thanks to a dog. A 13-year-old golden retriever who escaped through a dog door, ran to the neighbors, and led them to the house. The same dog the children planned to put down. He's old and just getting in the way. That's an exact quote. The dog turned out to be more human than the children. I ask you to render a guilty verdict, on all counts, for all 4 defendants, not for revenge, for justice, and for all those elderly people who have no one to protect them from their own families. The jury deliberated for 2 days. 2 days that felt like 2 years. I waited at home, with Hector, with Harold, who came every evening. The first night I couldn't sleep, kept replaying the trial in my mind. The prosecutor's closing argument, David's lies on the stand, Karen's tears that seemed more about self-pity than remorse, Stephen's unexpected confession. Had I done enough? Had I told my story clearly enough? Would the jury see through my children's excuses? I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, while Hector snored softly on his bed beside me. The house was quiet, too quiet. The kind of quiet that makes you hear your own heartbeat, your own thoughts, your own fears. What if they got away with it? What if the jury believed them, that they were just concerned children who went too far? What if the defense arguments about no permanent harm stuck? After all, I was alive. The house was still mine. Technically, nothing had been stolen, but they had stolen something. They had stolen my peace, my trust, my belief in my own children, and they had almost stolen my life. The second day of deliberations, I gardened, pulled weeds, trimmed roses, anything to keep my hands busy and my mind occupied. Harold came by at noon. "You're going to exhaust yourself, Funma," he said, watching me attack a particularly stubborn dandelion. "I need to do something. Can't just sit and wait. They'll reach a verdict when they reach it. Worrying won't speed things up. I know, but I can't help it." He sat on the porch drinking lemonade while I continued my war against the weeds. Hector lay in the shade watching us both with sleepy eyes. "Harold," I said finally, pausing with dirt-covered gloves, "what if they're acquitted?" "Then we appeal. We file civil suits. We don't give up. But the criminal charges—" "Margaret," he set down his glass. "I've been practicing law for 55 years. I've seen a lot of trials, and I've seen the evidence in this case. The text messages alone. Mom won't know until it's too late. That's damning. No jury can explain that away." "But they're my children. Juries don't like convicting children who locked their mother in a house and left her to die? Who hired a corrupt doctor to steal her life savings? Who planned to put down her dog because he was in the way?" Harold shook his head. "I've been watching that jury, watching their faces during testimony. They're not buying the concerned children story. They're horrified." "You think so?" "I know so. 55 years, Margaret. I know what conviction looks like on a jury's face. I wanted to believe him. wanted to trust his experience, his confidence. But until I heard the word guilty, I couldn't let myself hope. That night, I dreamed about Richard. He was sitting in his chair, the one I now sat in every evening, and Hector was at his feet. He looked at me with his kind eyes, Richard's eyes, not the cold calculation I'd seen in David's. "You did the right thing, Hoity," he said. "You were brave." "I don't feel brave. I feel tired." Courage isn't about not being tired. It's about being tired and doing it anyway. I woke up with tears on my pillow, and with the strange certainty that whatever happened, I had done what needed to be done. Harold came by at noon. "What will you do if they return a not guilty verdict?" he asked. "I don't know, but I did everything I could." "You did more than most. Most elderly people stay silent. They're afraid, ashamed. You fought." "I'm not brave. I'm just angry." Anger is also a form of courage, when it's directed against injustice. The call came on Wednesday at 3 p.m. "Mrs. Collins, the jury has reached a verdict. Session in 1 hour." The courtroom was overflowing. Journalists, cameras, people who had followed the trial. My children sat in their places, pale, tense. Benson, separate. His kind eyes no longer looked at people. The jury foreman, a man in his 50s, Gartoud, stood. "Your Honor, on the charge of false imprisonment, David Collins, guilty. Karen Collins, guilty. Stephen Collins, guilty. On the charge of conspiracy to commit fraud, David Collins, guilty. Karen Collins, guilty. Stephen Collins, guilty. Philip Benson, guilty. On the charge of reckless endangerment, David Collins, guilty. Karen Collins, guilty. Stephen Collins, guilty. On the charge of abuse of medical authority, Philip Benson, guilty. Guilty. All of them. On all counts." Karen burst into sobs. David dropped his head into his hands. Stephen sat motionless, staring into space. Benson was saying something to his lawyer. Quickly, panicked. The judge tapped her gavel. "Sentencing will be in 2 weeks. Until then, defendants remain on bail. Court is adjourned." The sentence. Judge Harper read it for 30 minutes. David Collins, 3 years imprisonment, 5 years probation after release. Karen Collins, 2 years imprisonment, 5 years probation after release. Stephen Collins, 1.5 years imprisonment, 4 years probation after release. The court takes into account his remorse and cooperation with the investigation. Philip Benson, 5 years imprisonment, lifetime ban from medical practice, $200,000 fine, prison. My children were going to prison. I looked at them, at these 3 people I had given birth to, raised, loved, and felt nothing. No, that's not true. I felt something. Justice. Cold, heavy, necessary justice. After the trial, journalists approached me. I gave one interview, short. "Mrs. Collins, how do you feel after the verdict?" Relief and sadness. Relief, because justice prevailed. And sadness, because they're my children. I loved them, raised them, hoped for something different, for them to become good people, worthy, kind. They didn't. Will you ever forgive them? I thought. For a long time. I don't know. Maybe someday, maybe never. But I know one thing for certain. I will never trust them again. Trust is not something that can be returned on demand. They destroyed it, and that was their choice, not mine. And the dog, Hector? What about him? I smiled. For the first time in many weeks, genuinely smiled. Hector is a hero. He lives with me, eats the best food money can buy, sleeps on the couch, even though that used to be forbidden. He saved my life. I will take care of him until his last day. How old is he? 13. The vet says he's surprisingly healthy for his age. as if he's found a new purpose in life. What purpose? Protecting me, like he protected me that day in April. That's what dogs do. They love, unconditionally, not for money, not for inheritance, simply because you're their human. I paused. My children couldn't do that, wouldn't do that. But the dog could. That's the whole difference between animals and some people. A year has passed. The first few months after the sentencing were the hardest. I had won. Justice had been served. My children were in prison, and I had never felt so alone. The house that had been my sanctuary for 45 years suddenly felt too big, too empty, too full of memories. Every room held echoes of the family we used to be. The kitchen where I'd made countless holiday dinners, the living room where we'd opened Christmas presents, the backyard where the children had played, where Richard had taught them to throw a football, where we'd had birthday parties and barbecues and ordinary Sunday afternoons. All of that was gone now, destroyed not by time or death, but by betrayal. Harold came by every day that first month, didn't say much, just sat with me. Let me talk when I needed to. Let me be silent when I needed that too. You're grieving, he said, one afternoon. Not just the betrayal. You're grieving the family you thought you had. Is that what this is? Loss is loss. Doesn't matter if it's death or discovery. You lost something. It's natural to grieve. The neighbors helped too. The Martins brought me casseroles, even though I told them I could cook for myself. Mrs. Hernandez from 3 doors down started inviting me to her book club. The Wongs across the street made sure to wave every time they saw me outside, checking in without being intrusive. I hadn't realized how much community I had, how many people cared. When you're focused on family, even a family that's plotting against you, it's easy to overlook the wider circle of support. The letters from my children started arriving about 2 months after they were incarcerated. David's were short, businesslike. He didn't apologize, not really. Mostly he asked about the house, about his things, about whether I could send him money for the prison commissary. Even behind bars, he couldn't stop seeing me as a resource. I didn't respond. Karen's were longer, more emotional, full of tears and justifications. I was just following David's lead. I didn't think it would go this far. Oh, I never wanted to hurt you. But never once did she take full responsibility. Never once did she acknowledge the magnitude of what she'd done. I didn't respond to those either. Stephen's letters were different. They started with apologies, real ones, specific ones. I'm sorry I blocked the door. I'm sorry I took your keys. I'm sorry I let money become more important than my mother. They continued with reflections on what he'd done wrong, what he was learning in the prison's counseling program, how he was trying to become a better person. I didn't respond to those either, but I kept them, read them more than once, wondered if the change was real. The media attention faded after a few months. Other stories took over. Other scandals, other trials, other betrayals. The dog saves elderly woman from scheming children story became yesterday's news. I was glad. I hadn't wanted fame, had only wanted justice. David served 16 months, released on parole. Laura divorced him while he was in prison, took the children. The house was sold to pay legal bills. Karen served a year, got out, moved to another state. I haven't heard anything about her since. Stephen served 10 months, got out. Jennifer didn't divorce him, but their marriage was never the same. He works at a different company now, lives in a smaller house, sees his children on weekends. Benson is still in prison, will serve the full 5 years. His medical license was revoked permanently. 3 of his former patients, elderly people he'd had declared incompetent, filed civil suits against him. Won. His assets were seized. As for me, I still live in the same house, The white two-story on Maple Street. The house Richard built. The house my children tried to take. Hector is still alive. 14 now. His arthritis is worse. He sleeps most of the day. But every morning he still comes to my bed, puts his head on the edge, and looks at me with his brown eyes, making sure I'm still here, still breathing, still his human. Sometimes I think about what could have been if Hector hadn't escaped through the dog door, if Mr. Martin hadn't heard the barking, if the ambulance had arrived 20 minutes later. I would have died on that kitchen floor, alone, locked in by my own children, and they would have come the next morning, found my body, called the police, played grief, filed for inheritance, and gotten away with it. How many times has this happened? How many elderly people have died alone, locked in their homes, while their children waited for the estate? How many Dr. Bensons are out there, selling incompetency findings to the highest bidder? How many families are planning their own interventions right now? I don't know the answer, but I know one thing. I got lucky. Lucky to have a dog who loved me more than my children did. Lucky to have neighbors who cared. Lucky to survive. Not everyone is that lucky. Last month I got a letter from Stephen. I almost threw it away, but something made me open it. Mom, I don't expect you to read this. I don't expect you to care, but I need to write it anyway. I was wrong. Not just made a mistake, wrong. Fundamentally, deeply, unforgivably wrong. I looked at you and saw dollar signs instead of my mother. I participated in a plan to steal your life. I stood at that door and blocked your exit while you begged me to move. Dad would have been ashamed of me. I'm ashamed of me. Prison gave me time to think. Too much time. I thought about what I did, why I did it, and I realized I was a coward. David said, "Let's do this," and I went along. Karen said, "She won't know," and I believed it was okay. I let greed and weakness override everything Dad taught me about being a man. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I'm not asking for a relationship. You owe me nothing. I just wanted you to know I understand now. I understand what I did to you, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to become the person you thought I was, the person Dad would have wanted me to be. I'm sorry, Mom, for everything. Stephen. I read the letter 3 times. Is it sincere or manipulation? Has he really changed? Or is he just saying what he thinks I want to hear? I don't know. Can't know. Only time will tell. I didn't respond to the letter. I'm not ready. Maybe never will be ready. But I kept it, filed it away. Evidence that maybe, consequences work. Maybe accountability teaches lessons that enabling never could. Today is Sunday, a 1.5 years since that April afternoon. I'm sitting on my porch. Hector is lying at my feet, his gray muzzle resting on my shoe. The garden is blooming. I planted tulips last fall and they've come up beautiful, red and yellow and purple, swaying in the spring breeze. Richard would have loved this. He always loved spring, loved watching things grow. I miss him, every day, every hour. Miss his laugh, his voice, his hand on my shoulder. Miss the way he looked at me like I was the only person in the world. But I'm not alone. I have Hector. I have Harold, who comes for dinner every Sunday. I have the Martins next door who check on me daily. I have a house full of memories and a life still worth living. My children tried to take all of that from me, tried to reduce me to a line item in their inheritance spreadsheet. They failed. Because a 13-year-old dog with arthritis and a heart full of love was braver than all 3 of them combined. Hector raises his head, looks at me. His tail thumps once against the porch boards. Good boy, I tell him. You're such a good boy. He puts his head back down, closes his eyes, content. We sit like that for a long time, an old woman and an old dog, survivors, family, the real kind. If you're reading this and you're worried about your own parents, really worried, not worried about your inheritance, then here's my advice. Talk to them. Actually talk. Listen to what they want. Respect their wishes. Even if you disagree, remember that they're still people with rights and dignity, not problems to be managed. And if you see signs of elder abuse in your community, a neighbor who seems isolated, an elderly person who seems scared of their family, someone whose concerned children seem more interested in assets than affection, say something. Call Adult Protective Services. Tell the police. Don't assume someone else will handle it. Too many elderly people suffer in silence. Too many die alone, betrayed by the people who should have loved them. I almost became one of them. But I had Hector. And now I have this story. A story I hope will make at least one person think twice. Make at least one family member question their motives. Make at least one elderly person realize they have the right to fight back. Because we do. We have that right. No matter how old we are, no matter how inconvenient we've become, we are not line items in spreadsheets. We are not assets to be liquidated. We are human beings with histories and hopes and dogs who love us, and we deserve better than what my children tried to do to me. Hector died peacefully in his sleep 3 months after I finished writing this story. He was 14.5 years old. I found him in the morning, lying in his usual spot by my bed, looking like he was just sleeping deeply. I buried him in the backyard, next to Richard's roses, marked the spot with a stone that says, Hector, hero, friend, family. He saved a life with his love. I miss him terribly. The house feels emptier without the click of his nails on the floor, without his warm presence at my feet, without his brown eyes watching me with that boundless devotion only dogs possess. But I'm grateful. Grateful for 12 years of his companionship. Grateful for that April day when he did what my children wouldn't, put my life above his own comfort. Grateful that his last years were spent being loved and spoiled, eating the best food and sleeping on the couch. He earned it, every bit of it. Sometimes I think Richard sent him to me, or that Richard was watching through those brown eyes, making sure I was safe. It's a silly thought, maybe. Unscientific, but it comforts me. And comfort, at my age, is worth a lot. I'm 75 now, still living in the same house, still tending Richard's roses, still having Sunday dinners with Harold, who's 84, and sharp as ever. The children remain distant. David sends a Christmas card every year, impersonal, probably written by an assistant. Karen has never contacted me again. Stephen still writes monthly letters, updates on his life, his children, his attempts to be better. I read them all, haven't responded yet, but I read them. Maybe someday I'll write back. Maybe someday I'll open that door a crack, see if real change is possible, see if the son I thought I knew still exists somewhere inside the man who betrayed me. Maybe, but not yet. The wound is still too fresh, the trust too thoroughly destroyed. For now, I have my house, my garden, my memories, my Sunday dinners with Harold, my neighbors who wave when I check the mail, and I have this story, this testimony, this warning. Guard your elderly parents. Protect your aging neighbors. Question your own motives when you think about inheritance, and if you have a dog, love them with everything you have. They will love you back tenfold. They might even save your life. The end this story is dedicated to Hector, and to all the dogs who love their humans unconditionally, and to all the elderly people fighting to maintain their dignity and independence, you are not alone. You matter, and you deserve to be protected.